Okay, let's jump right in. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a stack of notes, articles, and whole history about a figure who is, well, she's just monumental.
Truly. It's hard to find the right words sometimes.
It is. And I want to start with a quote that I think, well, it shocked me when I first read it. It's from Frank Sinatra.
Oh, I think I know the one you're talking about. It
Yeah.
is. Visceral is the word.
It's so intense. So Sinatra is talking about the subject of our deep dive today, and he says, quote, "Sassy is so good now that when I listen to her, I want to cut my wrists with a dull razor."
And you have to understand that's a compliment. A massive one coming from him.
A very dark, very dramatic compliment, but it tells you everything, right? It tells you something about the power of the woman we are talking about today, Sarah Vaughan.
Also known as Sassy, also known as the Divine One.
The Divine One, and arguably the possessor of, what some people call the single greatest voice in the history of American music.
That is a huge claim, but it's one I think the evidence really supports.
Is it, though? The greatest, that's a high bar.
It is. But when you look at the source material we have today,
Yeah.
biographies, critical essays from people like Gary Gittins, just the sheer timeline of her career, it's a claim that really holds up.
Okay.
The critic Scott Yanow, he called her as one of the most wondrous voices of the 20th century. But the tragedy, or maybe the central tension of her life, was that the world didn't always know what to do with a voice that big.
Right, and that's what I kept seeing in the research. She's constantly getting pulled in these different directions. Is she a pop star? Is she a jazz improviser?
Is she an opera singer who just took a wrong turn somewhere?
Exactly. So our mission today, I think, is to figure out how a girl from Newark, New Jersey ended up with that kind of reputation. We're going to look at how she navigated this incredible, almost constant tension between being a high art musician, and high art, and a commercial pop star.
Because reading through this, it seems like she was constantly being pulled in two directions at once.
Constantly.
And that's because she wasn't just a singer. I think that's the first thing we really need to get straight in our heads. She was a musician who happened to use her voice as her primary instrument.
Like a horn player.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And she stood right at this perfect intersection in time where the birth of bebop met the absolute height of pop music. She had a foot in both worlds.
And she collected the hardware to prove it. 2 Grammys, but she was nominated for 9. An NEA Jazz Masters Award. But beyond the awards, it's the story of the voice itself that's just, it's mind-blowing.
It really is.
So let's dive right into that. Section 1, the instrument. Because we have to understand what we're actually working with here before we can understand the career.
Let's do it. So where do you want to start with the voice, the range?
The range has to be it. When people talk about Sarah Vaughan, they don't just talk about singing, they talk about this insane range. We're talking about 4 octaves.
Which is incredibly rare. For a jazz or pop singer, it's almost unheard of. And we need to really visualize what 4 octaves means.
Right, it's not just a number.
No. Most pop songs, the ones you hear on the radio, they sit in a very comfortable 1.5 octave pocket. Maybe 2 if the singer's feeling ambitious.
Sure.
Sarah. She was building a skyscraper while everyone else was building single-story ranch houses. She can move from a soprano high C all the way down to a female baritone. And notice that I said baritone, not just alto or contralto.
That's low. That's like cello low. I can't even fathom making that sound.
It's very, very low. In her later years, critics described that lower register as a burnished contralto.
Burnished. I like that word. It sounds warm and rich.
Exactly. One critic from the New York Times wrote that hearing her use that lower register was like dipping into a deep, mysterious well to scoop up a trove of buried riches.
I love that image. It's not just about hitting a low note, it's about finding something down there. It implies there's a texture and a weight to it, not just a pitch.
Precisely. There's character in the note. And then, in the very same song, maybe even the next phrase, she could just flip to the upper register and deliver these incredibly delicate and ringingly high coloratura passages.
Okay, so coloratura, that's an opera term, right? What does that actually mean?
It basically means highly ornamented, florid singing. Think of fast runs, trills, a lot of notes packed into a short space. It's vocal gymnastics, essentially.
And she could just do that without formal training for it.
It seems so. It wasn't just that she could hit the notes, it was the texture. It was described by one source as thick as cognac, but capable of soaring like a violin. How can something be both of those things at once?
That's the mystery of it. And you mentioned opera, which comes up a lot in the research. There's this constant comparison to opera singers.
There is. And it wasn't just critics making the comparison. Betty Carter, another legendary jazz singer who knew a thing or two about vocals, she actually noted that with training, Sarah Vaughan could have gone as far as Leontine Price.
Leontine Price, the opera legend.
Yeah.
That's peer review at the absolute highest level.
It is. It's like a great novelist saying another writer could have been Tolstoy.
So the obvious question is, why didn't she? Why didn't we get Sarah Vaughan at the Met? If she had the pipes for it, why do we find her in smoky jazz clubs instead of opera houses?
That is a fascinating question, and it gets to the core of who she was as an artist. Bob James, who was her musical director for a while in the 60s, had a really interesting take on this.
What did he say?
He said the legitimacy of that whole world, the opera world, it just wasn't for her. It wasn't her vibe. It was too rigid, too structured.
You sing what's on the page exactly as it's written.
Exactly as it's written, every single time. She wanted to mess with the notes. You can't improvise in Puccini. If you change the notes in an aria, you get fired. In jazz, if you change the notes in a creative way, you're a genius.
So she chose freedom over structure. She had the instrument, but she wanted to use it differently. She wanted to color outside the lines.
Right. It's about the application of the instrument. It's the difference between being a world-class architect who builds from a blueprint and a world-class sculptor who finds the form in the marble as they go.
I like that. And this brings us to her technique, which some critics actually kind of weirdly referred to as her shtick.
Yeah, shtick sounds a bit dismissive, doesn't it? Like she's doing a magic trick or something that cheapens the art.
It does. It sounds like a comedy routine.
But in her case, it was about her unique mannerisms that became her signature, things nobody else could do. For example, she had this ability to fray or bend notes at the very extremities of her range.
What does fray a note mean?
It's like she'd hit the note perfectly and then just at the end let it get a little rough around the edges, give this human, imperfect quality. She'd also slide into a note, scoop up to it, color it, vibrate it. Her vibrato was just a world unto itself.
The vibrato, right. It wasn't that polite little shimmer.
No. It was described as voluptuous and heavy. It wasn't that perfect metronomic vibrato you learn in the conservatory. It was alive, it was visceral, it had its own personality.
And she had this very specific way of working the microphone, right? I've seen footage of her holding the mic way out at arm's length. It looks really dramatic, almost like she's pushing the song away from her.
That wasn't just for show, though. That was a tool. That was physical volume control.
Ah, okay.
She used the microphone as part of the instrument. Her voice had such a huge dynamic range, from a whisper to a roar, that the sound equipment of the era just couldn't handle it. The sound engineers couldn't ride the faders fast enough.
So she just did it herself.
She became her own mixer. By moving the microphone physically closer for intimacy, further away for power, she could alter the texture and the volume in real time. It was a very conscious technical performance style.
It's like a guitarist using a wah-wah pedal or a volume pedal, but she's doing it with space and air.
That's a great analogy. That's exactly what it was. All of this, the range, the texture, the technique, it led the critic Gary Giddens to call her the ageless voice of modern jazz, of giddy post-war virtuosity, biting wit, and fearless caprice.
Fearless caprice. I like that. It sounds like she was having fun with her own talent. Like she knew she was driving a Ferrari, and sometimes she just wanted to see what it could do on the curves.
She absolutely was. You can hear the joy of discovery in her improvisations. She knew exactly what she could do, and she knew she could do things no one else could.
Okay, so we have this four-octave wonder, this vocal Ferrari. But she didn't just appear out of nowhere fully formed. Let's rewind. We have to go back to the origin story. Section 2. Newark, New Jersey, 1924.
A very humble beginning. Her father, Edward Jake Vaughan, was a carpenter. Her mother, Ada, was a laundress.
But there was music in the house.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Her dad played guitar and piano by ear. Her mom sang in the church choir, so the raw material was there. The musical DNA was present from day one.
And religion was in the house. The church was central.
Very much so. The Mount Zion Baptist Church in Newark. That's really where it all started for her. Sarah began piano lessons at the age of 7. She sang in the choir, but crucially, she also played piano for rehearsals and for services.
And I feel like the piano part is something people forget. They think of her standing in front of a band, but she was a player first. She was a musician before she was the singer.
And that is the absolute key to understanding her later style. She understood harmony from the keys up. She knew why the notes worked together. She wasn't just a singer relying on her ear to find a pretty melody. She was a musician who understood the math behind the music, the architecture of the chords.
Which let her break the rules later, because she knew what the rules were.
You have to know the rules to break them effectively. But, like many great pastors' daughters and church organists, there was a rebel element.
Oh, do tell.
Well, by the time she was in her mid-teens, she was venturing out illegally into Newark nightclubs. We're talking about places like the Piccadilly Club, the Newark Airport. She was sneaking out of the house to perform.
As a singer.
As a pianist and a singer, getting a feel for a different kind of music, a different kind of audience.
So she's mixing the sacred and the profane before she was even out of high school.
Exactly. Playing hymns in the morning and jazz standards at night. And that duality, that tension, it defined her whole life. And it leads us directly to the moment that changed everything. The Apollo Theater, 1942.
Now, this is a legendary story, but the details in our source material are actually really specific and kind of funny. She didn't go there to become a star, did she?
No, not at all. That's the best part of the story. She went there to play piano. She had a friend named Doris Robinson. Sarah thought Doris had a great voice and should enter the famous amateur night contest. So Sarah just went along to be the accompanist.
So she's the sidekick. She's in the background, literally sitting behind her friend.
She's the sidekick. Doris Robinson gets up, sings her song, and wins second prize. Not bad at all.
Not bad for amateur night at the Apollo.
But then, a week later, Vaughan decides, you know what? I'm going to go back and try this myself. I can take these people. She had the confidence.
And she didn't play piano this time.
No, she went back as a singer. She got up on that legendary stage and she sang Body and Soul.
Wow. That is not an easy song to sing. That is a terrifying song to sing for an amateur contest. The chord changes are so complex.
Incredibly complex. And she won. She blew them away. And the prize, wait for it, was $10.
$10, that's it.
$10 and a promise of a week's engagement opening for Ella Fitzgerald.
Okay, the $10 is insulting, but the week opening for Ella? That's the real prize. Talk about a return on investment. $10 in a career.
It's incredible. And that week at the Apollo is where the next chapter begins. Because in the audience, or backstage, depending on which source you believe, were the people who would shape the entire future of jazz.
And this moves us perfectly into Section 3, the incubator of bebop. Because she didn't just join any old big band. She fell into the most important, most revolutionary band of the entire era.
The Earl Hines Band. Now, there are, conflicting stories about exactly how she got hired. Earl Hines himself claimed he discovered her. But Billy Eckstine, who was the star singer for Hines at the time, says he was the one who heard her and told Hines, you have to hear this girl.
So a little bit of a turf war over who gets the credit.
A little bit. But however it happened, she gets the gig. But there was a catch, right? There was a union issue.
Yes, and this is a great detail that shows you the business side of things. It's what one of our sources calls the Trojan horse hiring.
Okay, explain that.
So you had different unions. The musicians' union had jurisdiction over instrumentalists, but the American Federation of Radio Artists, AFRA, had jurisdiction over vocalists. There was a strike or a quota issue. It's complicated 1940s labor politics, but the bottom line was Hines couldn't hire another singer.
His singer slot was filled by Billy Eckstine.
Right, so what did he do?
He was clever. Earl Hines hired Sarah Vaughan as a pianist.
Ah, so he could bring her in under his existing musician contracts.
Yeah.
And just wink, wink, let her sing.
Yeah, exactly. So she's technically the second pianist. She comes in on the piano bench, but everyone knows she's really there to sing. But the most important part of this is thinking about who else was in that band.
Who are we talking about here? This is the crucial part.
We are talking about the absolute incubator of bebop. Dizzy Gillespie was on trumpet. Charlie Parker was on saxophone playing tenor. Actually, not his usual alto, which is a whole other story. This band was ground zero for the revolution in jazz.
Wait, hold on. So in the same room, on the same bus, every single night, you have Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Bird Parker.
Yes. And Sarah Vaughan is sitting there, maybe 10 feet away, listening to them reinvent music, listening to Charlie Parker deconstruct melodies and play 1,000 notes a minute.
So she's basically going to grad school for bebop while she's on the road. That explains so much. Her phrasing, her timing. If you're listening to Charlie Parker play saxophone every night, you're hearing someone treat a melody like it's made of rubber.
She's living it. She's breathing it in. And then when Billy Eckstine decides to leave and form his own band, which was even more modern, Sarah follows him.
And that band was even more stacked, if that's possible.
It is possible. The Billy Eckstine Orchestra included, at various times, Miles Davis and Art Blakey.
That is an insane lineup. That's like the 1992 Dream Team of jazz. It's not a band, it's a collection of future legends.
It is. And this is why Sarah Vaughan sounded different from all the singers who came before her. She was completely immersed in the complex harmonies of these instrumentalists. She learned to use her ear like a horn player.
So she wasn't just thinking about the words.
Not at all. She was thinking about the chord changes. She was navigating the harmony just like Charlie Parker would on his sax. Most singers breathe in a certain way. They hold notes for the lyrics to make story clear. Sarah would break a word in half if it meant hitting the right syncopation, the right rhythmic accent, the way a trumpet would.
So when we say she used her voice like an instrument, it's not just some poetic metaphor. It's literally because she was trained by the greatest instrumentalists of her generation. She was one of the guys.
Precisely. And this is also where she got the name.
Sassy.
Yes. The pianist in the band, John Malachi, gave her the moniker Sassy because, well, it matched her personality. She was young, she was confident, maybe a little fresh, a little bit of a smart aleck on the tour bus.
She could hang with the boys.
She could. And she liked the name. She even spelled it Sassy in letters sometimes. But Sassy is the one that stuck.
So she has the name, she has the skills, she has the credibility that money can't buy. But now she has to make a living as a solo artist. And this brings us to the real struggle, Section 4, the commercial struggle.
And this is the defining tension of her entire career. Pop versus jazz, art versus commerce. Bebop is high art. It's musically intellectual. It's often frantic and complex. Does it sell records to housewives in the Midwest in 1948?
I'm going to go with a hard no on that one.
No. And Sarah Vaughan needed to make a living. So she launches her solo career in the mid-40s. And she gets an early hit with a song called Tenderly.
Tenderly was a huge moment for her. She was actually really proud to be the first one to record that song, which became a massive jazz standard. It was an unexpected pop hit for her in 1947.
Ah, beautiful ballad. And then she had another hit with Nature Boy.
Right, but Nature Boy had that weird production story, didn't it? Something about a strike.
It did. There was a musicians union recording ban at the time. Basically a strike against the record labels. So instruments couldn't be legally recorded for a period.
So how do you make a record with no instruments?
You recorded a cappella with a choir.
That's a flex. I don't need a band. I'll just use a bunch of other voices as my orchestra.
And it worked. It was a hit. But this success, this ability to cross over, it attracted the big labels. And that's where things got really complicated. In the 1950s, she ends up with a very unique, and some would say schizophrenic contract arrangement with Mercury Records.
Tell me about this strategy, because it sounds like they were trying to split her personality right down the middle.
They literally were. Her manager at the time, her first husband, George Treadwell, he negotiated this deal. The idea was she would record the commercial, string-laden, pop-oriented material for the main Mercury label. That was for the radio.
And the other stuff, the jazz.
She would record the real jazz stuff, the stuff she actually loved, with small groups, for Mercury's subsidiary label, Emercy. It was their dedicated jazz imprint.
So Mercury for the money, Emercy for the soul.
That's the simplified version, yes. And in theory, it's brilliant. It allowed her artistic freedom on one side, but it also contractually forced her to record songs she absolutely detested on the other. It's like an actor doing Shakespeare by day and soap operas by night.
And we have a prime example of a song she hated, right? A song that just made her skin crawl.
Oh, yes. Broken-hearted melody.
Groans. I listened to it before we started recording today. It's catchy, I'll give it that, but it is incredibly cheesy. It sounds like a nursery rhyme with a backbeat.
It is the definition of cheesy. It's pop fluff of the highest order. Sarah Vaughan called it corny. She did not want to record it. She fought the label on it, but they made her. And guess what?
It was the biggest hit of her career.
Her first gold record. It was her biggest commercial peak, released in 1959. And the ultimate irony is, because it was such a massive hit, she had to keep singing it in concerts for years and years.
That must be actual torture, being the divine one, this incredible musician capable of improvising on the level of Charlie Parker and having to go out and sing this corny pop song every single night because that's what the audience paid to hear.
It's the price of fame. It's the definition of golden handcuffs. And later, when she moved to Columbia Records, they steered her almost exclusively toward commercial ballads. There's a real sense in the source material that she was constantly fighting to maintain her artistic integrity against the industry's relentless need for radio hits.
You mentioned George Treadwell, her manager and husband, and that segues us perfectly and somewhat tragically into Section 5, love, management, and money.
This is the pattern that emerges when you look at her life off stage, and it's just heartbreaking. She had this recurring tendency to marry men who would then take over her management.
The classic manager-husband syndrome, mixing business and pleasure.
And in her case, almost always with disastrous financial results. Let's start with husband number one, George Treadwell. He was the trumpeter.
He was the one who managed that Mercury Emercy deal, so he was smart about some things.
He was a sharp operator, for sure. He really managed her image. He managed her career from 1946 to 1958. He had her teeth capped to close a gap she was self-conscious about. He got her a new wardrobe, taught her how to carry herself on stage. He polished the image of the Divine One.
He built the Sarah Vaughan brand, he built the car, but he also kept the keys and the title.
He absolutely did. But he also managed all money. When they finally divorced in 1958, after a decade of her being a legitimate superstar, years of constant touring, hit records, gold records, Treadwell claimed that only $16,000 remained.
$16,000? After 10 years of being a household name, where did it all go?
That's what he claimed. They split it. She was left with $8,000.
That is, I don't even have a word for it. It's just outright theft.
It certainly feels that way. But you'd think she would learn a lesson from that, right? Don't mix your love life with your finances.
You would think.
But she didn't. Enter husband number 2, Clyde C.B. Atkins.
The source material describes him as a man of uncertain background, which is polite historian speak for he was a shady character.
Very shady. She met him in Chicago. He had absolutely no experience in music management, no connections, nothing. But she fell for him and she put him in charge anyway. She seemed to want that husband-manager dynamic again.
And how did that one go?
Worse. Much, much worse. For starters, the relationship was reportedly violent. And financially. He was a gambler.
Yeah.
A heavy gambler. He spent wildly. When they finally split up, he had put her $150,000 in debt.
150 grand in the early 60s? That's an astronomical amount of money.
It is. And it gets worse. She lost her house. The IRS seized her home in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, because the taxes hadn't been paid for years.
Just you for broke?
She had to work her way back from absolute zero. Imagine being Sarah Vaughan, the Divine One, a global star, and you're basically homeless and broke because your husband gambled away every penny you ever earned.
It's just devastating. You have this God-given talent, you're working constantly, and the people who are supposed to be protecting you are the ones draining you dry. It's amazing she kept performing. I think a lot of people would have just quit.
She couldn't quit. She had to perform to pay off the debts. But there is a silver lining in the 1970s. Not a husband this time, but a lover and manager named Marshall Fisher.
And where did she find him? He wasn't another musician, was he?
No. She found him at a concession stand in Las Vegas. He was a fan who worked there.
Wait, a concession stand employee?
Yes. And unlike the polished, slick businessman who came before him, Fisher was just genuinely devoted to her. He moved in with her, he treated her with kindness and respect, and he started managing her career meticulously.
Did he have any experience?
Zero. Absolutely zero music business experience. But he cared about her, and it turns out that was the most important qualification. He stabilized things for her.
That's a nice change of pace. Shout out to Marshall, the concession stand guy. Sometimes you just need a normal person who actually appreciates you.
Exactly. I should say, eventually she did marry a third time to a trumpeter named Wayman Reed, who was 16 years her junior. But Fisher was the one who really righted the ship during a crucial transition period for her career.
And that transition leads us right into Section 6, the Renaissance. Because after that rough patch in the 60s where jazz in general was struggling against the rise of rock and roll, she comes back swinging in the 70s.
She returns to recording after a bit of a hiatus. Yeah. She signs with a label called Mainstream Records. And again, there's this attempt to pivot to a more contemporary pop sound. She's covering Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Marvin Gaye.
Which brings us to the clown story, Send in the Clowns.
Ah, yes. The song that would become her signature for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
But the album it was on caused a huge, huge controversy.
Why? What was the problem?
The cover art. Sarah Vaughan absolutely hated it. It depicted a clown with an afro.
Oh, no. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was the 70s, but even for the 70s, it was a bad choice. She felt it was undignified, looked like a caricature. She had worked so hard to build this image of elegance and sophistication, and the label puts a cartoon on the cover.
What did she do?
She actually sued the label owner, Bob Shad, over it.
She sued him over the album art.
She did. She was furious.
Yeah.
But the song itself.
The song she kept.
She loved the song. It's a Stephen Sondheim song from the musical A Little Night Music. She learned it on the piano. Again, remember, she's a pianist first. And she altered the harmonies, changed the phrasing, and basically rewrote it to fit her style. It became her new masterpiece.
So she hates the album cover, sues the guy who owns the label, but keeps the song and makes it legendary. That is a power move. She takes this Broadway ballad and she just deconstructs it. She hits notes that are nowhere on the sheet music. She makes it sound like she wrote it at 3 a.m. in a smoky jazz club.
Absolutely. And this era also ushered in what we can call her symphony years. This is where the high art side of her personality really takes over and gets the recognition it deserves.
She started working with major orchestras, right? Finally getting the big, lush setting for that big, lush voice.
Yes. Michael Tilson Thomas, the famous conductor, was a huge fan, a true devotee. He brought her in to perform with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. She did a Gershwin program with the New Jersey Symphony that was broadcast on PBS.
And she won an Emmy for that show in 1981.
She did. And then a Grammy in 1982 for the album that came from it, Gershwin Live. It was this incredible validation. She was finally being presented in the setting her voice deserved, not in front of a small combo, but surrounded by a full 80-piece symphony orchestra. Finally, she was in a tuxedo setting that matched the sheer elegance of her instrument.
But she wasn't just doing Gershwin and the American Songbook. She also fell in love with a completely different sound around this time, Brazil.
Ah, yes, the Brazilian connection. This is my absolute favorite era of her music. Sarah traveled to South America and just fell head over heels for Rio de Janeiro. She said it was the greatest, most beautiful place she'd ever been, and naturally she wanted to record that music.
Bossa Nova seems like a perfect fit for her voice. That cool, complex harmony, the sophisticated melodies.
It was a match made in heaven. She went into the studio and recorded an entire album called I Love Brazil. It featured legends of Brazilian music like Antonio Carlos Jobim and Milton Nascimento. It was a passion project.
And it must have been a huge hit.
You would think, but... And here is that industry struggle rearing its ugly head again. She took the finished album to her label at the time, Atlantic Records, and they rejected it.
They rejected an album with Sarah Vaughan singing Jobim. Why?
They said it had no hits. They listened to it and said they couldn't hear a single. They wanted another broken-hearted melody.
Unbelievable. That's just musical malpractice. They have Sarah Vaughan singing Antonio Carlos Jobim, and they pass.
They pass. So she walked. She took the master tapes and gave them to Norman Granz, who was famously Ella Fitzgerald's manager. He released it on his own label, Pablo Records. And of course, the album was a critical and commercial success and got nominated for a Grammy.
It seems like there's a clear pattern here. Every time she trusted her own artistic gut, she won. And every time she listened to the Suits, she was miserable.
That is a very, very accurate summary of her entire career.
Okay, let's move to the final act, Section 7. We're in the late 1980s now. Her health is starting to decline, but she is not slowing down.
Not at all. She's a grand dame of music now. She's receiving major honors. She gets a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But musically, she's still taking these incredible risks.
And there's this project involving the Pope. What was that about?
Yes, it was a project called The Planet is Alive, Let It Live. It's a very unusual symphonic piece based on poems that were written by Pope John Paul II.
That is not something you see on the top 40. Yeah. That is a deep cut, even for her.
Definitely not. And then there's the South Pacific recording. This is a great story, gives you such a visual. She was brought into a studio to sing Happy Talk and Bali High for a new all-star recording of the musical.
Who else was on it?
Actual opera stars, Kiriti Kanawa and Jose Carreras. The opera world again coming back to her.
Right.
But Sarah, while the opera singers stood there stiffly at their microphones, she sat down on the studio floor to sing her parts. Just completely relaxed, grounded, doing her thing.
That is so cool. It's like she's saying, I'm at home here, this is my world, just sitting on the floor, out singing everybody.
And then we have the full circle moment. The perfect ending to the story, really. It's 1989. Quincy Jones is recording his massive crossover album, Back on the Block.
This was a huge album. Everyone who was anyone was on it. Ray Charles, Ice-T, Chaka Khan, Big Daddy Kane.
It was a cultural event, and he brings in Sarah Vaughan for one track, a scatting duet with Ella Fitzgerald.
The woman she opened for at the Apollo all the way back in 1942.
46 years later, it was their only studio recording together. And very sadly, it was Sarah's final studio recording ever.
Because she was sick by this point.
She was. In 1989, while she was in the middle of a run of shows at the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York, she collapsed and was diagnosed with lung cancer. It moved very fast. She died on April 3, 1990, at her home in California. She was only 66.
That feels so young. So young for a voice that sounds so timeless.
It really is. For a voice that timeless, it feels like we were robbed of a whole third act. The sources say she was at home watching a TV movie that featured her adopted daughter, Paris Vaughan, when she passed away.
And her funerals was back in New York, right?
Back where it all began, at Mount Zion Baptist Church, the same place she played piano for rehearsals as a little girl.
Wow, from Mount Zion to the Apollo, to all the world stages, and then back to Mount Zion.
It's a complete journey, a perfect circle.
So let's try to wrap this up. When we look back at the legacy of Sarah Vaughan, what's the big takeaway for you? What stands out?
I think we have to go back to that nickname, the Divine One. It sounds so grandiose, maybe even a little silly, but in her case, it fits. We're talking about, as Gary Giddens described her voice, a four-octave muscle of infinite flexibility.
It wasn't just a voice, it was a superpower. It was something that didn't quite seem humanly possible.
But more than that for me is that she refused to be boxed in. In a 1982 interview, she said something that I think is so telling. She said, quote, "I don't know why people call me a jazz singer. I'm not putting jazz down, but I'm not a jazz singer. I like all kinds of music."
She defied the labels. The industry wanted her to be one thing, a pop singer, a jazz singer. But she was all of it. Pop, jazz, opera, Brazilian. She just sang Sarah Vaughan music. She defied the algorithm before algorithms even existed.
Exactly. And that's the takeaway. She contained multitudes.
So here is our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We want you to go listen to one of her signature songs. Go listen to Send in the Clowns or Misty, or if you're feeling brave, even Broken-Hearted Melody. But don't just listen to the melody or the lyrics.
Listen to the mechanics. Listen to the very end of a phrase. Hear how she bends the pitch just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Hear how she moves the microphone away from her mouth to create a fade-out that no fader on a mixing board could ever replicate. Listen for that shift from the deep, burnished contralto up to that delicate, ringing soprano, sometimes in the same word.
Treat it like you're listening to a masterclass in physics and art combined, because when you listen to Sarah Vaughan, that's exactly what it was.
It truly was the Divine One.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.